Good afternoon and namaskar to one and all present here today. I am delighted to welcome you to a new episode of Futuristic Education, a web series dedicated to education. An Edudevs initiative in association with Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham to enlighten and empower the education community in the new trends that are emerging in the future of education. These are a city-based web series where edu leaders are invited to voice their views on pertinent issues in the 21st century education. And today's city happens to be Noida. We welcome you. I'm your host and moderator for the day, Devyani Kapoor. And without delaying and keeping the time limit in mind, which is about an hour, let's just quickly introduce our esteemed panelists of today. Today, we have with us Dr. Gopal Krishnan, Associate Professor, Amrita School of Engineering, Coimbatore campus. We welcome you, sir. Let us welcome Ms. Annie Willems, Principal, Modern School, Greater Noida. Warm welcome to you, ma'am, to this episode of The Changing Role of School Leaders. And not to forget, we have with us a rich pool of intellect in the shape of our audience who never miss to add value to our sessions. I welcome all our participants and our esteemed panelists to this episode of Changing Role of School Leaders in the 21st Century. The single biggest way to impact an organization is to focus on leadership development. There is almost no limit to the potential of an organization that recruits good people, raises them as leaders, and continually develops them. This is a quote by John Maxwell. A school leader, you see, is directly responsible for leading learning by creating a conducive environment for learning and developing teachers who can translate the school's vision into reality. This concept of leading learning, which CBSE also calls as pedagogical leaders, this concept of pedagogical leadership started gaining popularity in the 20th century when the demands on the schools was increasing. And these were linked to the student achievement. Schools were expected to improve, reform, and respond to the educational needs of the children. It was thought that in spite of coming regularly, why do children perform low? Questions were being raised on this. Also, the diversity of student population in terms of what culture they belong to, what socioeconomic backgrounds they came to, their language, their customs, all started gaining importance. The evolving nature of the school environment hence placed greater and newer demands on the school leaders as well, where knowledge of school operations like management, processes, regulations, notification, all these were necessary, but they were not sufficient. They were asked or they were expected to transform from mere administrators to becoming pedagogical leaders who would lead learning. Let us now hear from our esteemed panelists that what was the changing role of the school leaders? How has their role changed from mere administrators to pedagogical leaders? This is a common question which I would want both of our esteemed panelists to reflect upon. So I would first request Ms. Annie Williams to kindly address this question. What are the major distinctions between a 20th century school leader and the 21st century school leader? Yes, ma'am.
Very good evening to all of you. This is a very burning question if I say about changing what was required as a leader in 20th century and 21st century. So we are lucky that we have seen the end of 20th century and the beginning as well. So main discussion today is that what are leaders doing nowadays? So earlier, leaders were as instructors, and it was not child-centric. Now, the teaching learning process is child-centric and problem-solving. So the role of leader has changed that way, that a leader is not a manager anymore, but a leader is not a boss, but the leader is a person who is actually hand-holding, growing with the team, and making her or his team again, growing with the leader, growing with the school. I'm talking about school here. So leaders in any field, I feel that nowadays in 21st century, the leader has to be a learner first. It is learning, unlearning, and again relearning. So leader, the concept has changed from instructional or telling that okay, this has to be done. She or he was a boss that time, and movement from learning or teaching to learning has evolved. The method of teaching has evolved. So that is what I say is a leader has to upgrade, have to adapt, and first is the motivation for herself. That is very important. You are not born leaders. I have like if the data are seen that 30% of the leaders or 30% is inborn, if I can say, and 70% is made. So if we brief it, that leader is born 30%, and to become a full leader, the efforts from the person itself, that is a 70% efforts from the leader, has to be there. Yes, Devyana.
Thank you so much. I think very rightly said that when we look at number one, that the role has changed from an administrator and a manager to somebody who's leading learning. And second, you said that now leader is not that hierarchical boss sitting at the chair, the top level. He has to work collaboratively with his team, whether it be the teachers, the students, the parents, and create a conducive environment where learning has to happen constantly. That is what. Thank you so much, Ms. Williams. Over to you, Dr. Gopal Krishnan. Yes, sir. What would you like to say?
Yeah, first of all, good evening to one and all listening. Mainly, I feel that from the perspective of education, how the challenges of a leader or what are the challenges that a 21st century leader will face. So in comparison with the 20th century leader, first of all, I would like to tell that in order to do something, we need to know what we are going to do. So we need to have a very clear clarity, or we should have very clear goals. So this aspect, the 20th century leaders were in fact fortunate because they were able to understand what they want to do, because the changes that was happening, especially in the area of education and technology, that was happening in such a pace. Whereas in 21st century, what is happening is, now many of the futurists or educationists are telling that we are approaching a technology singularity. So we do not know what is going to happen in 5 years or in another 10 years, what is going to happen. We have no clue. So now the leader has to be more adaptable. Like the leader has to be ready to face any new challenge. So you cannot divide. Usually what we used to do is that with respect to education, we used to divide our entire life like this much portion is to learn, and now the remaining portion we will have a livelihood based on whatever we have learned in the previous part of our life. So that is fast changing. As madam was pointing out, the learning has become an inherent thing, or continuous learning has become inherent, and it has become like an inherent need for a leader, not only for a leader, for the entire stakeholders in education field, I would say. So the major challenge, I think, is the changing environment. So the environment is fast changing and expectations are huge. So now what happens is that the earlier expectation is like you need to foster the students to get say the skills like speed, accuracy, clarity, etc. Now what is required is the students should have critical thinking, they should have problem solving, and they should be having social and emotional intelligence. So the expectations are changing, and at the same time they are changing so fast that the leader has to think about the future in a very high pace. Like the rate at which the things approach us is really fast.
Well said, Dr. Gopal Krishnan, and I really like that when you said that it's not about compartmentalized today. So today, leadership as a skill, number one, has to be, that's become a skill. So it's not about that, I am going to probably give orders, or probably that there is a compartmentalization of life that, okay, for these many years, I will learn, and these many years I will reach. So leadership is no longer about the position. Leadership is about, inspiration. I was reading somewhere that we follow leaders not because we have to follow them, because somewhere we want to follow them. That is the real, that they inspire you to follow. So yes, thank you so much. And I think the tone of the session is very well set. And now let's move on to our round one. And you see that school leadership has been identified as a very, and which you both were, validating, another very critical element of student success. And subsequently, enough resources and training should be provided to our school principals and administrators to allow them to create a strong ecosystem in our schools and support teachers and parents as well. These lines I'm quoting are basically of Shaheen Mistry, and I'm really very, I really like these lines because you need also to provide them that kind of a training. Initially, it wasn't never like this. It was more of an R&D. A school leader would graduate from, being a primary and the middle school and the PGT educator, and then would become a principal. And there was so much of R&D happening when he reached and sat on that hot seat. But today, thankfully, the realization is that there has to be a lot of investment in terms of honing the leadership skills, and then also realizing what are the leadership skills. So my question to Mrs. Annie Williams is that, do you think that leadership training has been implemented effectively? Is there still a lack of optimum resources to provide a tailor-made training to school leaders? Like, how many leadership, if I directly ask you point blank, that how many times leadership training, effective leadership training happened to you? So that is what my question to you is.
Yeah, it's very important nowadays that everyone has to, upgrade in terms of, as Gopal Krishnan sir said, that in terms of your education, in terms of your skills. Now, with the changing environment and after the pandemic, there are many other skills which we have realized that these are more important than what you, as an administrator, or you, when you became a leader in a school or in a company. Here we are talking about education. So the skills involved now are that earlier, like a person can be empathetic, a person could have been, very nice talking to the team and telling, okay, I'll do this training and that training. But this competition has also increased. Now the competition is of what? The managing. It's not, the leadership is not restricted to academics now. The leadership it's become a multidisciplinary approach of the leader as well. So a leader nowadays needs a training in terms of, first of all, if like Dr. Gopalakrishnan said, the technology, we all were pushed into it directly. So the leaders, like we are, in education, we are here for 30 years now, for me. Now in 30 years, I've seen that gradual change. And many of our friends, many of our colleagues have not come up to that level, and many have done very well. So the difference here lies in the training. Now, who did the training? Nobody. Because there was nothing organized. There is still nothing organized. I did because of my passion. Somebody did because of his or her aim to join or do something better or reach the level of, requirement of that institution. But as we have teachers training, we do not have a leaders training. In between, Government of India started that they started with MBA courses for the leaders, administrator. But that was sponsored only for the government employees, government school education leaders. So that time I thought, why not me? So I started with MBA, upgrading myself, but couldn't finish due to certain reasons. But yes, I did. Now, when we say training in terms of academics, technology, pedagogy, curriculum, all these have to be trained. So in our times, like when we evolved from a teacher to a PGT to, a principal today, we have learned on the way all the multidisciplinary approach of teaching. That's why we could gel better now, because we had a thought, we had a vision that time of this day where these things will be there. So the leader has to have a vision where the training, now what training should I get? There's no clarity about it. So should I go into marketing? I should have AI. Should I understand data? Should I understand social media promotions? So lot many trainings are there. Social skills, language training. So I feel that there is a lack of proper training modules or proper organizations which are validating the leaders that they are okay with this system which is going on, where we are putting the children into this kind of, okay, we are going to go to OMR now, like in board exams, then we are going to application-based questions, we are giving cognitive skills, but are we training them, like for the children also, even for the teachers? Now the point comes of SEL, social emotional learning. It is needed for a leader as well. How to give, how will you counsel if you don't understand? So therefore, for a leader, there are many avenues where a leader needs to be trained along with her passion, along with her motivation herself. I always tell my team, some of them are here joined today, I always tell them, karna padega nahi, karungi. That is the difference. I want to do, not I have to do. When that approach is there, you will learn. But of course, we all feel that there is, like after B.Ed, there is no training. Even after that, B.Ed is obsolete now, because the methodology was very different. Now it is a different thing. So if I, as a leader, do not understand what is going on, how can I tell my team or make them cross their own limits? How can I ask them to move from their comfort zone? So a proper training is required, though I did my trainings of my own, spending half of my salaries for my own training, because schools won't do it. Management won't do it, because in private organizations, the problem comes is whether this principal is going to stay after we spend such a lot of money on our training. But some good institutes are helping their principals to have, degrees and trainings from good institutes. But generally, if I say mostly I've worked in North India and being founder principal of few schools, I feel that the training for the principal comes with the help of the management. So the managements have to see if their team is trained properly. They ask the principals to train the teachers, but what about the principal? She also needs. So their stagnation comes if we are not learning. I know my job very well, but I want to learn more. From where will I learn? I have to invest in my from my own pocket, and then I learn something, and then in other school or otherwise something else is required. Then I have to train for that again. So there should be proper curriculum, pedagogy for leader training, educational leaders also. That is a need of the hour. And like in some, I have worked in DPSs for about 15 years. And I love that one thing over there. There's a DPS HRD, which continuously gives training at their own level. And we were sent as teachers also, and as leaders also. We used to have the yearly training, like CBSE is doing. CBSE is open training, but it is again voluntary. There should be certain, levels where we should be given trainings, and different areas, a proper pedagogy and curriculum is required, so that we can streamline. Yeah.
Thank you so much, because hearing you out, I felt that I would now say that the principal's role, probably in the 20th century or the early years of 21st century, was much more easier, as we said, as I was initially talking about, that they were administrators and managers. So they knew, okay, the role was restricted. Now, with the pedagogical leadership, the term being attached, so the role has expanded magnificently. So, as you said, that they need to be technologically trained and pedagogically trained and curriculum development. Then, of course, the social emotional skills and soft skills, so many things. And they need to be counselors and psychologists. They keep facing these crises. So complexities of job of a principal have increased. The question is, are we getting that kind of a training? And Miss Annie William put it so beautifully that the managements need to think about it, because how much and how often can a principal will be able to undertake. I think that was kudos to you and to so many who took that plunge that, I want to train myself. But there should be a process, as you were quoting your earlier, the DPSs, that they have a HRD training. And I'm sure most of the schools would be having. CBSE is doing a lot of trainings, but then how much and what is the takeaway of each and every principal? I was reading a research by the National Center on Education identifies 3 challenges current and prospective principals face. One, we just discussed, there is increased job complexity. We had a great, past 5-7 minutes, we've been only talking about the expanded horizon of a principal's role. Then insufficient supply of good candidates, so they become recruiters as well. That's a training which they've not had. And then inadequate preparedness, as we just felt that a lot of R&D happens and we then juggle our way out. So moving on to Dr. Gopal Krishnan, I would like to ask you that how do you suggest we combat and conquer these complexities that accompany the position of an educational leader? First, you can also brief us about the various complexities, and then maybe if you could suggest some tips to the management, to the policymakers, and to the principals themselves.
Yeah. So definitely, I would say that when we talk about the complexities are really very high, and I feel that it is going to increase, because as I told, world over, we are actually facing a change, especially a change in the area of science and technology. And again, these changes are fastly pervading into all other human relapse. So what is going to happen is that educators are actually the primary source who is going to provide resources to take up these challenges and to effectively solve these challenges. So not only technology related challenges, there are so many other ethical challenges in relation to technology is also coming up. So the complexity associated with the job of an educator is going to increase. That is what I would say to begin with. Now, what are these complexities? First of all, we should know what problem that we are going to solve. So in that case, what I would say is that the fundamental requirement for an educator, or for that matter, a leader in education, is to be a continuous learner. That is, we should be very well aware of the challenges that are there before us, and we should be updated ourselves. Because I will just give a very simple example. So if somebody is, say, teaching computer programming to maybe a high school student or even to an upper primary student. So now the earlier era, the student is hearing that for the first time. So the student may not have many questions, but now the student himself might have, or herself might have, learned programming when he was 5 or 6. So we are hearing about such courses all over the place. So, and not only that, the student may ask that, can you tell me how Google works? So I'm just typing some search word, but Google is replying me in few seconds. So how it works in fact? So can you tell me what is the type of algorithm that it is using, or so say a web platform which is helping me to shop, how it works, and can you tell me how we can make a similar platform, etc. So there can be really complex requirements from the student side. So the educator has to be a continuous learner to begin with. For that, the educator should know what he or she should learn. And another point that I would like to tell regarding the leadership is, I feel that we need to think about decentralized leadership, because finally, when it comes to the delivery, because we make very good curriculum and we talk about pedagogical practices, we talk about innovative and novel examination practices and all that. But who is the final point of delivery? It is the teacher who is there in the classroom. So this leadership should percolate from the top administrator to the final point of delivery, which is actually the teacher there. So then only I feel that there should be an ownership from the teacher to to think about what is the requirement of my job. So instead of just looking at as something that he or she has to deliver because he or she has been asked to. So what happens now is, when we are bringing in reforms, it becomes an additional burden for the educator. That is, not only he has to or she has to teach, but also should follow some kind of instruction. So instead of just pushing it down, I feel the leadership should be made decentralized first, and the ownership should be instilled. And as a bottom line, what I would say is that we always say that a society where teachers and farmers are respected is a society that is going to improve. So as a society also, we should start respecting teachers more, and we should also think about the rewards, remuneration, and associated things for the teachers. So teaching should be made a very attractive profession, and not only because of passion, but because of the other attraction also. People should start choosing teaching as a profession, because it is a requirement for everybody.
Very rightly said. Thank you so much, Dr. Gopal Krishnan. Because you said that trying to take ownership. What is leadership then? You know, teachers, we keep talking about delegated responsibility. We need to also speak about delegated authority. That then only. So leaders need to create more leaders. Leaders need to generate every stakeholder to become a leader in their own sphere, which sadly is the gap, I think, that happens in the system. And yes, you were talking about continuous learning. Now, when you're talking about continuous learning, that's something which I feel that each and every, that becomes, because in this knowledge economy, everybody has to be a continuous learner. You constantly learn, you constantly, because world is changing so fast. You know, we were talking about in the last webinar about the VUCA world. So the world, there is so much of uncertainty, complexity. And so learning cannot stop for anybody. And I feel greater the role and higher the position, the greater and more time needs to be spent on constant learning and knowing what is. Thank you so much, Dr. Now, now let's talk about principal assessments. Research shows most principal assessments are ineffective in gauging whether principals are or are not performing learning, or probably try managing the roles and responsibility. As Miss Annie Williams just said, and I want her to elaborate on this, she said that there wasn't a fixed procedure or proper system where there is a lot of training happening. Now, of course, last few years, maybe a decade, there has been a lot of talk about training the edu leaders. The term edu leaders has come into. Otherwise, these so for teachers, there was always a talk about this. And yes, training was the niche schools, the management, some about 5%, I would say, schools and managements of private schools were taking this training of, but otherwise, leave aside assessment, there was no concept of training, which is now, which is emerging, which is very good. Often assessments focus on general management skills and knowledge rather on specific behaviors, such as data analysis, goal setting, that lead to school-wide improvements in teaching. Now, there is a need for principal assessment. We need to also have regular assessments and performing standards set for them. What are, this question is to Ms. Annie Williams, what are your thoughts on leadership evaluation? What should be the structure, or if you could suggest some parameters that could be set, so that the idea is not to, judge, or the idea is to constantly keep honing their skills, constantly keep improving them, motivating them, so they can motivate their staff.
It's a very, hot question, I would say here. The point is, if I say what will be the criteria of judgment, because again, we go back to the same question, that the principal is doing everything now. A mentor, a counselor, a subject matter expert, and even not only your own subject, any subject, you should be able to understand what the teacher is teaching. So you have to at least the basic knowledge of the subject. Then you have the skills, competency, application. You should know the experiential learning. So I feel it is quite difficult to streamline that, okay, what are the criteria of judgment of a principal? And now main thing comes here is what the school is looking after, or what the school is actually wanting. With my experience, last few years, it has become more of a, you will see many principals are not, they were not into education. They have directly been inducted as principals. This is my experience. No offense to anybody here. They are marketing experts. They are MBAs. So here, the objective is very different. If I want to run a school, like I joined this education as a passion, how many teachers or leaders are joining this profession, noble profession, for passion? So now again, the testing or the evaluation, we cannot have number testing, exam or anything. Evaluations, like we have audits, or we have evaluation ACRs and all for the full year. So ACRs for principals are also there. Point is, depends upon school to school, area to area, what will be the criteria of evaluation. So the basic criteria can be there. Then the, you can say soft skills, you can say the need of the hour, like technology, able to work on Microsoft Word or Excel sheets and, all the tools, edtech tools are, because if I'm telling my teacher to do it and she makes a default and I'm doing an observation, if I don't know myself, how will I check? So class observations are important. Then we are dealing, at the end of the day, we are dealing with human resource. It is not a product. We cannot have that this 2 children, I made this, so this is my 100% incentive. We are, evolving the child. We are handling a human being. And every child, when we talk about education, every webinar or anything, I've emphasized, we are not making them literate, we are making them educated. So earlier focus was literacy. Now it is, Gandhiji has always said education is a holistic development of a child or a person. Education opens a mind. But what? Like Martin Luther King, he said, is character involved. Education is intelligence, is character. So education gives the character. So for that character, again, the analysis has to be there. The skills have to be checked. Every child, every parent, every day is a different subject to analyze. Needs are different. You cannot package it. Okay, this parent, I will talk this, and this parent, I will talk this, and this goes for all. It is, again, I'm saying that 30% born leader, 70% success of the leader depends upon the skills she or he has and develops alongside. Like, I may be very aggressive principle earlier, but with age, with experience, with learning of the children understand me more than teachers, I feel. This is my real thing. I connect more with because what happens is, no offense to teachers here, our employability trainings, teacher trainings, they are far too disconnected with what is happening now. Teachers don't connect with what they are doing, the lesson plans and all those elaborate things. They are not able to connect, because when we talk to the child, maybe that day the lesson plan for that day will not work because the children are not in a mood to study. So there the skill of the teacher or the leader comes. Right? So how can you evaluate? Evaluation is a continuous process, and assessment is a test kind of thing. So evaluation, if I say I little bit took some trainings and attended some conferences, and I came to know that in US, New York University and Education Department, what they're doing is they're doing continuous assessment of the teachers as well as the leaders throughout the 3 to 4 years. After that, they get the degree of education. So why can't we do here? That whether when I joined, suppose I'm a teacher or I'm a leader, I joined, I started with some skills, and did I move on? Did I come to that category in the first year, then in the second year, then the third year? After that, I should be given a diploma or degree or a certificate. So these are certain points where we have to work and evolve, like now NCT or teacher training, B.Ed courses are being changed. So same way, an evaluation can be done, which is very important, but it is to be very easily, brought into the process or into the system, because many of the educationists or the leaders won't like it, that we have worked so many years, now they're going to test us, right? Same as teachers, like when the senior teachers, PGTs and all, you try to teach them something, they say, we have worked for 20 years and 25 years, and now she's going to tell us she's a new person. So it has to be thought of as a positive point, as a roadmap to bring the success of the whole team, all the stakeholders. And I think there the training and orientation of the parents is also involved, because we cannot just train teachers, we cannot just train principals, we cannot just train children. The main stakeholder is a parent nowadays who has to see. So accordingly, we have to formulate certain system where we can evaluate. We cannot say this principal ke time mein itne admissions ho gaye and that's why she is a good principal. If admission didn't happen, that means she is not a good principal. 70% schools are doing that, and especially after the COVID and during the COVID. But the principal must have been very good, right? So I feel we need, but it has to be very, very systematically evolved. Thank you.
Yes, I think very well said and very insightful discussion is very insightful discussion is happening, and I really value your thoughts on this. And national education policy, as the changes are seeping in, because it talks about pedagogical leaders who would be then leading learning. When they say leading learning, it is not just what they mean is that co-creating those spaces in collaboration with all the stakeholders, parents, as you were also mentioning, parents, the teachers, students, pulling the ship together. So that is the expectation. As you made a point that now, which I would probably beg to little differ, where you said that now suddenly people from MBAs or people from various other industries have come and started taking over as principals, which I do partially agree that you need to understand the system. But considering that the role of a principal is changing, so I don't think so there is any harm in people from other industries if they have that, because initially it was very mandatory. You need to have an MEd, you need to be so many years of a PGT, you need to have these, but they were very theoretical documentations or very theoretical aspects. Because if you're a PGT for a number of years, how does it make a difference, or how would it make a difference to you not when you become a principal? So principals training, which you earlier said, the training in technology, training in pedagogy, training in curriculum development, training in social emotional learning, all these aspects. So yes, that is something. But
Devyani, I just wanted to speak on
for
this.
sure.
I do think there's no harm in taking them. But what I mean is, it is again depending upon the schools, what actually they're focusing on. If we want education, I think the teachers who have worked hard and those who have gone into, and they're doing MBAs. Every second person is an MBA now. I'm not against anybody having degrees and things. Point is, when a person, the perspective of a MBA or a IITian is a very different thing. Everyone has a different perspective to look into one thing. So if I say why I am doing an MBA and why I'm doing, I have done a data analysis, why I have done web analytics, because it's a need of the hour. The point is the basic thing should be there in a principle. The compassion has to be there, the empathy has to be there. You cannot take it as a product. That is what makes a difference. I'm not saying all the MBAs taken in as a principal or administrator are good, but the point is that is the school, is the management, what is their focus, what they want from some of the schools, they just want good academicians. They can look into they're empathetic, compassionate, they can handle small children. We take HMs and coordinators and all. Why? Because they've handled those children. They know their ways, their psychology, their upbringing. That is very important. You cannot be a marketing and sales professional and looking after our children. So that is one part of it. There's no harm. But
absolutely,
if you develop that, yes.
In fact, let me be very honest, I wanted this to come out. That is why I said, because I completely resonate with you. And this was the reason I wanted to rub that, we say that, okay, it's structured, but there was a training even to that PGT. Why was she not given the training of an MBA? And that is why when they succumb, I completely relate that yes, to understand the ocean, you need to be in ocean. You can't be on the shore and predict what. So you, your people who have spent years and decades in school, don't leave it to their skills, that some may have that administrative instinct in them or managerial instinct in them. Some may be academically academic. Any principal has to be hands down academician. So definitely, this is the reason I want this debate to come up, because that kind of training which you were earlier talking about, that schools are not investing, and then at times the principal are not able to do justice, and then they need to they are made to uh, leave those positions. So that training. And two, some schools have come up with very beautiful arrangements of academic head and an administrative head. So they don't have a concept of one principal. Because when you're talking about the expanding role, I mean, how can one be a hardcore academician, which is a requirement of a principal, a marketing expert, a managerial person, looking at a psychologist? Too much to ask from a principal. Too much of thing. So yes, their roles should be. I mean, when I read and I quoted in my that they need to be thinking out of the box. They need to be, inspiring their staff, motivating them, empowering them. Are they even doing it? You create a white paper, you create a white paper document and put 10, 15, 20 such pointers. But is it happening in the real sense? It is not. Where those places, which are those niche schools which you are talking about, they have a paraphernalia of people who are, pulling this ship. So yes, definitely, I completely resonate. People who have spent years and decades, they understand education. They understand the psyche of the child. They understand how the system, because education too is a very, very unique industry. And we are dealing with, nascent children, in the shape of raw material. We are shaping them. So definitely, trainings become extremely important. There's one question which I really want to ask both of you first, Dr. Gopal Krishnan. That NEP reforms are contributing to principles, changing landscape. We are all the pedagogical leadership document is a very, very powerful document which lays down the steps, the roadmap and everything, expectations. As a leader yourself, and do you feel that the foundation of school leadership, as we have been taught in previous decades, would it become completely obsolete in the 21st century? Or is there some takeaways we can always have? Because suddenly we are talking very different, the role, the identity, the expectations have suddenly become very, very different. So I would like Dr. Gopal Krishnan to please answer this first, and then I would come to Miss Annie Williams. Yes, Dr. Krishnan.
Yeah. So what I feel is actually, whatever we say, like there are increasing complexities or the responsibilities are changing, etc. But I do not think that means we have to get rid of everything that we have learned in the past, because as a species, human beings have we have used whatever that we have learned in the past to improve our future. So at the end of the day, as Madam Williams was beautifully pointing out, we are dealing with human beings. So we can augment ourselves with more technological skills. We can augment ourselves with more modern tools. But the basic skill set that we need to do the man management, that actually remains the same, is what I strongly feel. So irrespective of whether we are there in the 20th century or 21st century, that particular skill of managing people, that is going to remain the same. And the primary tenet of that is to understand that actually we are dealing with people, and we are dealing with actually educators who are every day they are trying to motivate. Because a teacher, for example, I can be in an IT industry, and if I am a little off that particular day, I can just show my desperation in my workplace. It's not a big problem. But if I am a teacher, I am going to face a class, and if I have an emotional problem, I cannot show my emotional problem during the class. I need to still, irrespective of my emotional position, I need to be cheerful, and I need to be motivating, and I have to put an effort to change my behavior. So it is not only about that technology or the technical aspects, it also about a lot of social aspects. So I think the leadership as a whole, they should first of all consider these aspects very seriously. And as Madam Williams was talking about, like, one point that I would like to emphasize there is, for example, if a soldier becomes a general, then the general is very well aware of what are the problems in the war field. So always, if somebody who is there in the academic field takes up the position of a school leader, that always makes a difference. And as you were pointing out, it is very good to have multiple leaders. That is, instead of expecting a person to be a master of everything, we can have multiple leaders. So if we want to handle marketing, or if we want to handle the novel technology that is creeping into education, we can have a separate head. And whereas there can be an academic head, and the academic head has to be given enough flexibility and freedom. So I would say, in summary, I would say that whatever that we have learned in the past century, those things are remaining the same, because still we are the same. So human beings have not changed, only the environment has changed. So we need to learn that which has changed, but at the same time to maintain, or we should care our forefathers or ancestors have instilled us in the form of values.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Gopal Krishnan. Yes, Miss Annie, because you've seen you've had a long tenure, and you've seen both the sides, the 20th century, the traditional leadership, and the today's transformational leadership or pedagogical leadership. What would you like to say on that?
I will continue with Dr. Gopalakrishnan, that what leaders earlier we learned from them, and the leaders today, we are still evolving. The point is that after the pandemic, it has become very clear that technology only, or the things, robotics and this and that only, cannot work. So a good teacher, a good team, a good leader with other skills, there's cognitive skills plus soft skills, which a robot cannot give, which a smart class cannot give. A smart class is there, the child can, see. Point is, we have vast ocean of knowledge, and there comes a leader who tells what to take. The wisdom, the touch, the feel, the motivation, that remains same from all the systems, from Chanakya till now to APJ Abdul Kalam. All were great teachers. And they are the idols for today, that after being into all technology, after being into Gurukul system of studies, they were very strict disciplinarians. They were learning. They knew, if you talk about Chanakya, the first teacher, I would say, I am very inspired by him. And the point is that he made, I'm very proud to say that I'm an educationist, that we make people, we make their future, we evolve them. So that cannot be taken from a teacher or a leader, even in 21st or 22nd century. So that will go on.
Oh,
even in by Rabindranath Tagore also. That same system has come back in NEP 2020. right? Vocationalization, experiential learning, cognitive skills. Rabindranath Tagore started with that. So we are coming
So
back to that
beautifully
again,
said.
right?
Yes.
So leaders
That
will,
whether
teachers will always
any,
remain.
yeah, whether it is any century, whether it was Chanakya, Rabindranath Tagore, or as you said, APJ Kalam, or leaders to come, there are certain things which we look upon, and that is why they are leaders, the feel, the touch, the motivation. And those are the traits of what we call primary greatness in anybody, and who who aspires, I would say, to become a leader. Thank you so much, both our panelists. I think this was such an insightful discussion where we genuinely touched upon all aspects of school leadership and how their role is changing, how it is becoming a little difficult, and how it's expanding, I would say, and what is required. And we also explored about that, yes, there could be, instead of one concept of one leader, there could be a multiple leadership concept, which would only benefit the system. We have a tradition that when we roll out our theme for a webinar session, we seek our viewers and participants to question our panelists, ask questions from our panelists, any question of their choice. And then our team of experts reviews those questions and takes out one question, which becomes the winner's question. And today's winner's question is by Ms. Jasmeet Kaur, AV Public School, Fazilka. And if she's there, I would like her to ask this question to both the panelists. Is she there in the meeting today? Is Ms. Jasmeet Kaur, AV Public School, Fazilka there? My team, can you please check?
No, ma'am, she's not there today.
All right. This is a winner question. I shall ask on her behalf. She says, should the leaders of the school be having the autocratic approach or the democratic approach for the smooth functioning of the school? Should the authorities be delegated to the subordinates or not? Very beautiful question. I think we have been only discussing about this, but still, I would like each one of our panelists to address this briefly. Yes, Miss Annie Williams, if you could address this first.
Jaspreet from Fazilka, Sat Sri Akal. So the point is that when we say autocratic, democratic, socialist, or whatever, a leader is the team and team is the leader. So there is no politics here. If I say it is the team growing together, a family, which we always say teachers are a big family, leader or the principal is the eldest in the family. So they all work together. And sometimes you have to, yes, ensure that it has to be done like an elder at the home. And sometimes you have to take the, ideas and things from the youngers also. So a family work, it's a type of family work, not a kind of politics or office work that, okay, no, we have to hear to her or you have to listen to her and follow it. It's not like that. Sometimes, yes, you have to be strict about certain things when required. So it is mentoring more than anything else. I hope I'm
very well said. Yes. I think it's absolutely clear because a good leadership is a blend of a maternal and a paternal aspects, and that is the core of a leadership. Leadership is like parenting, because there are times when you need to be strict and there are times when you need to, but both the ways, a leader is only doing that for the best results of his team, of the children, whoever. Yes, Dr. Balakrishnan, what would you say on this?
Yeah.
So on this question by...
Yeah. So what I would like to say here is, in my view, I would say that it has to be democratic. So because whenever we consider history, democracy is always better, although it has all its faults. Because especially in leadership also, I would say, whether it is leading an education institute or leading any institute for that matter. Because I remember a quote from Watson, the famous Watson and Crick behind the DNA discovery, the structure of the DNA discovery. So what he says is, politeness is the poison of all good scientific collaborations. So basically, when we are timid and when we are just in the name of respecting authority, if ideas are not coming out, then actually the leadership is not percolating, as I told in the beginning. So I feel that in science, there is a term called complex system. So it is actually, we define that it is a system where there is no central leadership, but properties emerge. So in order to make our schools and educational institutes a system of similar kind, I think we need to have democratic leaders, where I would say constructive criticism and creative disobedience should be encouraged. So that's what I would say.
Very well said. Constructive criticism. And the next person, constructive criticism and
creative disobedience is what I would term.
Beautiful. I think that is that one punchline, today's line. Constructive criticism and creative disruptism. So disobedience, because, and I would add on to this that not just democratic, but collaborative. Why do we even talk about authoritative and a democratic? These are very now old terms. Let's talk about the newer term, which is collaborative, and that is the whole idea. Collaboratively creating more leaders in their ecosystem, in their co-create their learning spaces, creating those conducive environment where learning, and why we are constantly saying learning with nurture and learning would happen is because, again, I would say in a knowledge-driven economy, learning is something which has to be constantly happening. With this, we come to an end. With the new world order, it is incumbent upon authorities to prioritize the development of their current and future principles by providing them relevant professional development and appropriate support system to ensure that the work is sustainable. Failure to do so will make it less likely that reforms that we were talking about under the National Education Policy 2020 will affect the desired change, instructional improvement at scale. The role of principal, yes, we discussed, has shifted from being an administrator and a manager to one who can lead learning and become a pedagogical leader. And this, by doing this, he could do by encapsulating certain aspects like which our panelists mentioned, and I am just briefing, taking initiatives and risks, thinking out of the box, managing resources, creating a culture of change, building relationships with teachers and staff, social, emotional learning, communicating effectively with all the stakeholders in the system, and inspiring and providing intellectual stimulation. Thank you so much, dear panelists, and please keep watching our web series, Futuristic Education. With each time we bring and we deliberate upon some pertinent issue, which is very close to the 21st century education demands. If you have anything in mind, please write to us at info@edudevs.com. But before we leave, let's look at a small video and see what lies in store in the coming weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Annie Villan and Dr. Gopal Krishnan. It was genuinely a pleasure interacting and discussing with you on today's topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us. And I'm delighted to talk to Devyani. Had seen many of your episodes earlier. And thank you for your team who have collaborated. And thank you for all the viewers who kept motivating us to speak. And hope some change will occur, and let's meet again sometime. So thank you very much. Have a good day.
For sure. For sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.